this video is brought to you by Bono. Readers, if I had a nickel for every time a Maximoff warped reality and affected the lives around them either for better or worse to get over their own internal shit, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's strange that it happened twice. Because that's exactly what happened with William Kaplan, aka Billy Maximoff, aka Wiccan, when it was revealed that the witch's road he, Agatha, and the rest of the Coven of Witches walked was his creation. Yeah, he felt bad once he learned that he was second-handedly responsible for the deaths of Alice, Lilia, and Sharon.
Who's Sharon?
After all, Wanda also quote-unquote felt bad about the life she had under the influence of her therapy session. But morally speaking, that doesn't excuse either of them for what they actually did. But for a good chunk of the queer demographic that loved WandaVision, they were able to excuse it for Billy just like they did with his mama. Like I explained in my video about why queer folk, specifically queer men, rooted for Wanda, aspects of what Wanda sought and tried to acquire were incredibly relatable for a lot of queer individuals who have been craving a lot of things that straight folks constantly take for granted. And that was enough for people to actually look past what she did to the citizens of Westview. Now with the release of Agatha All Along, Wiccan's MCU origin seems to have been received by a similar audience and in a similar fashion. And for today's lesson, I want to go over what that fashion was, how it was accomplished in his narrative in the show, and how it affected the story. Not necessarily in that order. Let's begin. Hey readers, LaRon here, offering you analysis and perspective on your favorite bits of geek and pop culture media. And for this video, and pretty much for the rest of this year, I'm going to be partnering up with Bono. Bono is an app that ensures your yearly donations to your favorite charities and organizations have the most impact possible. Just tell them what you care about, share your budget, and they'll match you with the best charities providing the greatest impact based on your budget you set. As you all know, I'm very passionate about a lot of social issues, both on this channel and on my social media platforms. This includes not just social justice issues surrounding race and gender equality, but also the trifecta of maintaining the rights, mental health, and livelihood of queer folk. Considering that I'm both black and bisexual in America with 2 queer romantic partners also in America, especially during the 47th US presidency, all of these aspects of my life intersect. Not only am I constantly fighting against white supremacy and systemic racism like my fellow brothers and sisters and other like-minded non-pick-me POC, but I'm also fighting the concepts of hegemonic masculinity and the like that sparked from the heteronormativity promoted by patriarchy pushed on us by our government. And as someone who heavily believes in putting their money where their mouth is, Bono provides a real and efficient way for me to do exactly that. When I signed up, I chose 3 causes that I care deeply about. Then Bono showed me 3 charities that do the work in the causes that I chose. Some, like the Trevor Project, I already knew about. Others, however, like Lambda Legal, who deals in HIV and AIDS education and advocacy, and Outright International, that aims to protect the rights of queer people on a global scale, I didn't even know existed. And from there, I set a budget that'll split across all these charities and organizations that do the work in the causes that I care about in the form of 1 monthly donation. All of which I'm able to see a detailed summary of how it's being used, what goals it's helping accomplish, and what services I helped provide for. I can see how many days of housing my donations are providing young homeless queer folk here in the States. I can see that my donations helped fund a solar energy system for a tribe of Native Americans that'll stop over 2,500 tons of CO2 emissions from being produced. I can see where and how my donation is actively making a difference in people's lives. And you also get a single deductible receipt with all of the donations you made to the different charities and organizations across the whole year to help reduce your stress levels when you file your taxes. And no, readers, I say with no exaggeration, that was a game changer for me. Specifically, because I pay my taxes. You hear me, Jeff? All of this is why I'm partnering with Bono, and through this partnership, they're offering the first 50 readers who join the app with me $5 toward their first donation. You can either click the QR code on the screen right now, click on my affiliate link in the description box down below, or use the code Readus, that's READUS, when you make your donation. When you do join, you'll see what my donations have helped fund, and we can all see how our collective impact has actually made a difference. Once again, the first 50 readers that either use the QR code, use the code Readus when you make your donation on either the Bono app or the website, or use my affiliate link in the description box below will get $5 towards their first donation. Thanks again to Bono for wanting to team up with me to do some good in this world. Now, on to the lesson. The Witch's Road is incredibly important. This is the first thing you need to understand in order for everything to make sense, especially now that we know that it was never real until Billy made it real, so bear with me if you already know all of this. From the very beginning, the Witch's Road was something that was initially created by Agatha, promising the greatest desires of those in a coven of witches that survived traveling down it. And because witches believed it enough, its ballad eventually went the way of Stevie Nicks, and information about Agatha's lie became mainstream enough for the magic of Billy Maximoff, newly christened with the gift of life in the real world, to believe in the existence of the road enough for it to serve that purpose once it was made real. And when it was made real, the same subconscious use of his magic proceeded to flesh out the rest of the road once the coven got there, every time Agatha revealed lore and rules about the road that she made up on the spot because she knows that it's not actually real. This includes the rule that only witches can walk the road, that not everyone in the Coven of Witches will survive to the end, and the one that was made up upon their arrival that trials will be involved, catered to every individual witch in said coven who walks it. That's why Billy was trying to push to be part of the coven so badly throughout the trials, because he could only get what he wanted by the time he reached the end of it if he were part of the coven. But all that changed once it was revealed that Billy's magic subconsciously based the visual aesthetics and locations of the road off the displays and decorations of William's room second-handedly, and that through finding its creator and establishing the quote-unquote information into the physical manifestation of it in real time, he was the one who brought the road to life in the first place.
It was me.
Billy created the road based on the myth that Agatha created to steal the powers of the witches that came to her to be their guide through it, who made up information about it on the spot. And he did it so that he could find his digitized fraternal twin brother Tommy, who is also roaming around the ethereal like he was, but doesn't have the magic necessary to claim a freshly dead body in the real world like his soon-to-be Emperor Consort of the United Kree/Skull Alliance brother did. But if Billy has the power to create the road, create its trials, and grant those that survive it their desires, why is he walking it to grant his own? Why can't he produce his magic within the road only when incredibly stressed or in bursts? Why is he willingly handicapping himself by going through the same trials that all of these witches that actually need what the road promises them, when he has the ability to grant himself the desire of finding his brother without it? Well, that's pretty simple. It's because he actually thinks it's the only way he's worthy of doing so. The Witch's Road is a test created by Billy's own subconscious mind and magic, specifically for himself, but in a way that others can benefit from if they're careful enough. Not knowing he has the power to pull Tommy out of the river Styx already, he subconsciously uses the road and the trials as a way of proving his conscious self that he's capable of accomplishing such a feat of magic. That's mainly why his magic was sporadic during his time on the road, and why he pretty much is set in his powers after they escape it and saves Agatha from her ex. Billy wanted to subconsciously prove to himself that he had the power to pull Tommy out of the trash remains of Wanda's Westview hex and into a physical body freshly made available to possess like he did himself. Unlike his mother, who manipulated Westview as a trauma response, Billy created the Witch's Road as a test for himself. Now, I say that others can benefit from him subconsciously creating the road if they're careful enough, because Billy wasn't the only one who had their desires fulfilled from both walking and surviving the Witch's Road. The only one other than Billy to accomplish this was Jennifer Kale, who only received her desire because the experience caused her to learn that Agatha bound her powers in the first place and forced her to undo the magic in order for her to get them back. So just like Jennifer Kale's acceptance and growth was marked with the award of something they've wanted for a very long time, so is Billy's success in being able to guide Tommy into a body of a drowning camper. Billy's magic put himself and those caught in the same goal through ridiculous levels of physical and mental traumas personalized to the individual participants involved, and he didn't realize this until he had already awarded himself a job well done with the MCU version of his comic-accurate costume. Because despite how he acted when it was first summoned,
is this the road? Because we should really go like right now.
Or how he tried to show he was part of the Coven in the middle of it,
So I mean I'm part of the Coven?
it's very important to understand that Billy didn't realize the Witch's Road was his creation until after they escaped and Agatha died. So even though it was his powers metaphorically congratulating himself for realizing they're powerful enough to bring his brother to the real world, Billy just thought that it was the road that granted him what he wanted, and basking in his victory allowed himself the confidence in and the realization of himself after accepting his witch side in both power and display. And we know this because when Jennifer Kale beat the road, she did the exact same thing. So now that we know this was the cause of the road's creation and that the true Witch's Road was inside Billy all along, curious minds, aka me, when I was high during the first Monday of December 2024, couldn't help but wonder, why did Billy question himself? Well, let's take into consideration that Billy entered the freshly dead body of William Kaplan and claimed it as his own in order to exist outside of the recently destroyed Westview hex. And yeah, he's alive and able to experience the world outside of the sitcoms his mom forced him to be part of so that she could cope with her trauma. But now he sees that the parents of the boy that just died thinks that he's still alive. And worst of all, in a way that makes sense to them according to how life is in the MCU, there's a part of them that have false hope that they're wrong because they kinda already know. So he tries to be their son for them because it makes him feel miserable that what he is was capable of casting such a large cloak of false hope. It would have been easier if he never went into William's body at all. At least the parents would be assured that he was dead. Better sudden disappointment and grief over a lifetime of depression, isolation, and disconnect because said someone is only going through the motions. Because of this, to him, Billy is hurting them simply because he exists. So he does his best to perfect and present the facade of William while pushing down and reserving the truth that is Billy. Does he succeed at it? No, of course not. Him seeking answers about the Witch's Road from Agatha is proof that his desire to be his true self instead of the uncanny valley edition of William Kaplan he's been presenting has been making itself more present. We see it in the episode explaining how he came to be here, especially when he first properly introduces himself to her.
I'm Billy Maximoff.
And this aspect about him resonated so much over the course of the show that when Agatha finally addressed him as Billy, even she felt the need to console his feelings and emotions on the matter.
So you broke the rules, big deal. That's what kept you alive. It's what makes you a witch.
So, If you are a witch that feels guilt and shame about how they came to be here, and you mask who you truly are to try and pantomime a life you can never fulfill, to the point where you barely acknowledge the power within you because of how much you've reduced yourself to wear the mask of the person people want you to be, what do you think happens to all of that magic? It's not gone or forgotten like the truth of the person is attached to. It doesn't reduce, it becomes concentrated. Concentrated enough to create the witch's road and to operate in a way that allows Billy to accept the fact that it's okay to allow himself to be who he truly is. And now you see how this all connects to the twist regarding the creation of the road. Billy doubted himself because he felt bad about how he came about being alive. He has guilt about immediately moving into William's body after his death in a way where fragments of William are now part of Billy. This doubt manifests in ways that makes him believe he doesn't think he's enough, worthy, or deserves the life that they have, that they stole it from someone more deserving. So in order to see for himself, Billy puts himself through it without even knowing he's putting himself through it. But his journey of self-realization and acceptance not only is pretty dangerous due to how unregulated it is, but that's also the reason why it doesn't just affect himself. What I just described, if this wasn't about anything Agatha All Along related, is an individual who suffers from such extreme levels of self-deprecation that other people's lives might be fatally altered if they end up involved with his various attempts to convince himself that he deserves something. And considering not just the queerness of Wiccan's character, but also the queerness of the show and the overall queerness surrounding being a witch in the first place, this level of identity crisis-driven depression and deprecation Billy represents is incredibly relatable to the queer audience that watched this show. So much so that there are fans of Billy's portrayal in Agatha All Along that can easily forgive his creation of the road and ignore what he has to deal with emotionally thanks to how he came to be in the first place. I guess he is like his mother after all. So why do queer folks feel this way? Why is the relatability so strong between themselves and Billy's mental process, as we both don't and do see across all of Agatha All Along? I guess what I'm really trying to ask here is, why are we like this? So if there's one thing Marvel is going to pride themselves over DC about, it's how they like to portray their superheroes in a less pantheon-focused monolithic light. That means making characters relatable by way of obstacles and flaws that real-life people experience on the daily, as opposed to using a metaphor or an allegory that can be used to represent said obstacles and flaws. This aspect about Marvel's heroes translates to the MCU interpretation of them about 60% of the time, the majority of them being the TV shows that they made for Disney+. And because they mostly happen in the shows that are canon in the MCU, seeing that Billy Maximoff was dealing with both guilt and imposter syndrome in Agatha All Along didn't really surprise me. After all, this is one of the top 5 most powerful spellcasters on the heroic side of Marvel Spectrum in their roster. Having a character deal with the likes of not feeling he's good enough, while also tackling an extreme form of survivor's guilt for buying and riding around in a certified pre-owned body, sounds exactly what somebody with those abilities would be going through near the beginning of their journey. But it's also in who that resonates with when they see it play out that also makes this character shine in the Marvel relatability department. Because not only did we watch a teenage boy deal with continuing living the full life of a recently dead guy and feel that he had to earn his existence because his subconscious set up an elaborate test for him to take in order to do so, but we watched a queer teenage boy do it. And that amplifies everything. Billy's established queerness allows what he's going through to resonate with more people who already seek both queer and personal relatability representation, but could only ever receive one or the other. They stay for the out gay boy, even if they're not cis or male themselves, because you want to support and whatnot. And then you find out that they're going through a more fantastical version of a trauma that either you are currently dealing with or have recently dealt with. Most of the time, you being queer is the reason this trauma exists in the first place. So Billy and what he's going through in Agatha All Along doesn't just cater to the gays in the sense of boy-like or cis guys. It's the literal seeds of self-doubt that everyone who wasn't born straight feels regularly. Trans and non-binary people will know exactly what Billy's going through in regards to feeling like a foreign invader in your own body. His desire to join the coven reflects on the time we individually sought security in community because we're so alienated from our blood families naturally or otherwise. We limit ourselves because who we are goes against the growths of heteronormative patriarchal capitalism, just like Billy does with his magic and desires until he's reached a point in his life where he feels like he's earned them. You see, it's easy to see queer allegory in the emotions, actions, and reactions in the character's current headspace, but it resonates even more and hits even harder when the character is queer themselves, because now, in this case, you're no longer looking at Billy Maximoff. You are, instead, looking at your reflection in a mirror. And it's because we see ourselves via Billy, we see every time society has made us feel guilty simply for existing. Every time we had to stifle ourselves either to fit in or in order to survive. Every time we had to struggle with accepting ourselves because society makes us believe we don't deserve the good things that happen to us when they do. Billy's arc in Agatha All Along made a lot of us queer folk feel seen because his queerness being such a fundamental part of his character helped make sure that the queer relatability surrounding the problems were heavily prioritized. So much so that nobody could deny or invalidate the queerness in both his character or during his arc, even if they tried. But what I think is also an important bit is that they technically did the same thing to validate his whiteness.
Don't steal her struggle.
Queer people flocked to Billy because they could relate to the fantastical exaggerations of guilt, shame, self-hate, and unworthiness that he went through in Agatha All Along. Just like his in the show, our magic gets in our own way by stealthily taking the form of an obstacle that, upon overcoming it, will prove to not just a high percentage of the world that already hates us, but also ourselves, that we deserve to exist. And when we're trying to overcome these self-made obstacles, a lot of things can unfortunately get damaged in the crossfire. Relationships can crumble, caution and paranoia can increase, morals are tested, all because they were in proximity of you lying to yourself as a way of trying to work it out. So we feel bad for him because now we are him. And because the majority of us already give some to ourselves now and again, we naturally give Billy enough grace to not feel bad about the deaths of Alice, Lilia, and Sharon.
Who's Sharon?
And while it does count that Billy genuinely feels bad about being responsible for their deaths in this way, it feeds into the belief that problematic queer characters who lean more toward queer respect and away from queer respectability can't generate profit now that rainbow capitalism plays a factor in mainstream media. If you want to see me touch on the subject a bit more, you can check out my video essay about the queer main characters in every film and TV show written and directed by Jay Blakeson, and why seeing them be complete pieces of shit was a net positive for true representation. Billy's journey of self-worth over the course of Agatha All Along was something that a lot of people needed to see, even if they never experienced media literacy enough to come to this thesis themselves. especially because he learns that he's been holding himself back as a result by the end of the series, just like a lot of us queer folk realize in living life in a heteronormative society. So that raises the question, if Billy can finally decide to stop holding himself back, why can't you? But I digress, readers. Your homework assignment for the day: write in the comment section below what you thought of Agatha All Along if you've seen it. Or if you feel like sharing with the rest of the class a character you've seen in film or television that you related to so well that you were damn near looking at your own reflection. Whichever question you decide to answer, I'd love to know your thoughts. A huge shout out to my patrons, both big and small, for helping make this channel possible. Make sure you check out the card at the end of the video to join, or click the link to it or any of my affiliates in the description box below. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.